Good morning. So we've just up anchored from wherever it was we were in the easter group of the Abrolhos Islands, and we're heading north to the Wallaby group of the Abrolhos Islands. We're sailing there along with Free Range Sailing, Troy and Pascal, and we're all hoping to go and visit tomorrow the resting place of the pride of the Dutch East Indian Company, the Batavia. The Batavia wrecked on the Abrolhos Islands in 1629. That's 392 years ago, and tomorrow is the anniversary to the day. 392 years to the day. So if you don't know the story of the Batavia, hang on to your hats, because it's a pretty gruesome tale of mutiny and mayhem and murder that took place here in the Abrolhos Islands. We're going to go and investigate that. This is Rob, and I'm Rachel, and these are our boys, Finn, Declan and Ivan. We have sailed our catamaran Javelot across the Pacific Ocean. We would love it if you join us for the adventure.
'Cause this way is my home. These highways are turning into quicksand, and these days I'm drowning on dry land. You've been building your walls up to touch the sky, but they're coming down now. They're coming down, no, they're crumbling.
Sun in my face, how beautiful. Oh, it's lovely, nice and warm. Last few days we've been locking up the boat in Geraldton. Where's Robert gone? There he is, behind me. And locking it up, making it look like it was attached to the motor, but actually it wasn't. If they just pulled the cord out, it wasn't attached to anything. It was locked to a jetty or whatever, but it wasn't actually locked to the boat. It was just there for looks. Now it's the real deal. Not that we need it here, because I don't think anybody's going to run off with it here. We're beside Long Island in the Wallaby group of the Abrolhos Islands. If the wind dies down today, we're going to hopefully go and have a snorkel dive. The ruins of the Batavia. There's not much left of it apparently. There's no wood, but just a few cannons and an anchor, I think, and some other bits and pieces. Anyway, for 392 years ago to the day, it sank over on Morning Reef. That's where we're going. Before we visit the Batavia's final resting place, we need to back up a little and tell you the story that makes this shipwreck stand out from all the others. The Batavia wrecked on early hours of the morning on the 4th of June 1629 on Morning Reef, which is just a hop, skip and a jump from where we are now. We can't go there today because it's too rough, but tomorrow conditions look perfect for us to go for a snorkel on the reef there. We were going to go to the southern group of the Abrolhos Islands because that's where we thought that the Batavia was shipwrecked. And so did all the historians. For 332 years they thought the shipwreck there was the Batavia. So sure were they that they named the southern group the Pelsart group after the commander of the Batavia. But no, wrong shipwreck. The Batavia, the pride of the Dutch East Indian Company, was on her maiden voyage from Amsterdam to her namesake Batavia in Indonesia, now known as Jakarta. The Dutch East Indian Company, known as the VOC, was the powerhouse of trade in rare spices and exotic textiles throughout Asia. Prior to refrigeration, spices were highly prized for flavouring and preserving food, and the profits were huge, as much as 400%. On that morning in 1629, however, Arian Jacobs, the captain, and the gunner, who were on night duty, disregarded the moonlight on the surf as simple moonlight on the sea. Crunch. In an attempt to lighten the ship's load and refloat its bow, they threw cannons overboard. But it soon became apparent that the ship was doomed. An evacuation was ordered. Using the 2 support boats, a 30-foot yawl and a 40-foot longboat, the captain and the commander started to ferry the passengers to the small, low-lying islands close by. So once they got to the islands, the meagre rations that they'd managed to salvage from the wreckage were not going to suffice. So Pelsart, the commander, and Jacobs, the captain, along with 47 others of the survivors, took the longboat and headed to Australia to look for water. They thought that was the best thing they could do for everybody. Oh no, because the person they left in command was one Geronimus Cornelius, and he was a psychopathic maniac. So Cornelius's answer was to divide and conquer. He started putting people, he didn't think there'd be enough food for everyone, and he had a little band of merry men who were looking up to him, and he got them to divide everybody between the different islands. And there was very little resistance to this. The only trouble he thought he would get was from the soldiers that were left behind, and he convinced them that he would take them by boat and drop them at North Wallaby Island, where they were to look for water. And he convinced them not to take their weapons with them, because they'd need all their strength to carry those barrels of water back down to the boat that he would pick them up with. He had no intention of picking them up again. He thought by dropping them there, they would run out of water and they would perish. But he wasn't counting on the ingenuity of one Wiebbe Hayes. Wiebbe Hayes was just an ordinary soldier, but like cream, he rose to the top. And when they didn't find any water on North Wallaby Island, at low tide, they waded to West Wallaby Island, the only island in the whole of Abrolhos that actually does have fresh water on it. They struck gold. They also found rock wallabies, which they called bouncing cats, and multiple seabirds and sea eggs. They had it made really. So they lit a fire to signal to Cornelius that they had found water. He saw it and he ignored it. Now at this time, Cornelius was getting his men to go around the different islands at night and kill the men and the women and the children. He did keep some women as concubines for his men. In fact, he kept only one. She was apparently the most beautiful woman in Europe at the time. Her name escapes me. Her name was...
Text.
What was her name? I don't know, I can't remember. Lucretia Yarns was her name, and Cornelius kept her for himself. Some of the people, obviously, they could see what was going on and they escaped into the water. They swam away from the islands. They thought that was better than being drowned or have their throat cut by Cornelius and their men. And they made it to West Wallaby Island as well, and they were able to alert Wiebbe Hayes and the soldiers there what was going on. We're just getting ready. It's just about 6:45 in the morning. And it's a bit chilly, and there's people talking on the VHF radio.
Ivan's up.
Ivan's just got up, and Long Island's behind us. And over there is West Wallaby Island. We're up early because it's high tide. We tried to go yesterday and it wasn't high enough tide. Today is the higher high tide, and we're going just before the high tide to get to Wallaby Island to see where Wiebbe Hayes and the other soldiers and the escapees from the mutiny of the Batavia managed to sit out a few months before they were rescued. There's still a fort there that they built and the fires that they lit. Maybe no footprints though, just ours. And Rob's gone to sleep. Is it me? Am I talking? Or is it...
She's very excited. She's very excited.
I was indeed very excited. The story of the Batavia has gripped me, as I hope it will you if you're hearing it for the first time. We made our way across West Wallaby Island to the first European structures built on Australian soil, Wiebbe Hayes forts, where the soldiers and escapees sheltered and defended their territory. This may or may not have been one of the wells. Rob's going to test the water for saltiness. They said they could climb into them, so salty.
No, salt-free.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, might be okay.
We'll leave it for now.
Yeah.
If we get thirsty, we know where to come.
If we get, you know, stranded here, we'll come back to that as a necessary thing.
But here is the fort. We found another little one, but I think that must have been a sentry post.
This is the main.
This looks like the main abode. 47 people.
So they would have had wood built on top of this and to shelter over.
Yeah, you would think so. But look at it, it's so...
Wouldn't be much of a shelter.
I mean, that is for almost 400 years old, and it's stood the winds and weather that sweeps through here. Because they get big northerlies through the winter.
These little stones have lasted that long.
That's amazing. Not enjoying that water, Rob? 500 metres southeast of the fort is another coral structure, a two-room fortress which we took to be the sentry post used by the Maroon soldiers to defend the beach from attacks by Cornelius and his men, who were desperate to leave no witnesses to their savagery. They defended themselves 3 times. The first time they came, they had guns. Cornelius had guns, but he didn't want to use them because he was saving them for when Pelsart came back. They didn't know they had water and food, so they thought they'd be really starving and feeble. So when they arrived on the beach, these guys came attacking, and they actually got Cornelius and they tied him up, trussed him up, just as Piersat's boat was arriving. All this was going on the same day, and they saw the boat arriving. It had been looking for them for a month in this area, didn't know where it was, and that was the saving of them.
And Pelsart had his own adventure sailing to Jakarta.
He had, but he kind of deserted them as well. Gone off the next day, looking for water. Didn't come back for 4 months. You still thirsty? Yes, after his 3.5 months' absence, the Commander Pelsart returned from Jakarta in the frigate Sardam. When he learnt what had taken place on the islands, the mutineers were brought before the ship's council and tried for the crimes of killing approximately 125 innocent men, women and children. Cornelius and 6 other men were hanged on Seal Island. 2 were sent off in a beach-built yawl towards the Australian mainland and were never heard of again, and the rest were transported back to Batavia to be retried. Today, the site of the wreck is a marine conservation zone, with several cannons and anchors still obvious after nearly 400 years, though the majority of the remains have been removed and displayed in the Western Australia museums.
When the world is unsteady, the ground beneath me shaking, I keep asking people questions, but nobody seems to know. Well, I can move steady when the wind blows. The rhythm's strong inside me. Hold myself tightly when the heat goes. Raise the blinds covering the windows. I'm coming out of the dark. I'm coming up from the ashes.
Definitely did not touch the coral at all. Clean. So smooth. Look good. I reckon if you look back at that replay, that's a 400-year-old anchor you're swimming through. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And that, my friends, is the abbreviated story of the Batavia. In the words of Batavia author Peter Fitzsimmons, The whole astonishing saga makes the sinking of the Titanic look like a Sunday school picnic.
Well, I can move steady when the wind blows.
Oh, I touched the table.
You sure did.
The Batavia, the pride of the
If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, give us a thumbs up, and best of all, share it. It helps us heaps.
Come on, ain't it so bad?